Hello, hello, and welcome, 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 welcome. Listen, if you are here and if you're watching this video, that means that you're pregnant. It means that you are preparing for birth. And so today we are talking about creating a birth plan. Now, creating a birth plan is not just a good idea, right? It's for any mom who wants to feel empowered and prepared for labor, right? And so in this live today, I am going to give you 4 secrets on how to prepare a birth plan that actually works, even if everything doesn't go exactly how you plan it out. And so I am going to be talking about that. If you are looking for practical tips on how to create a trustworthy, effective birth plan, then you definitely want to stay tuned if that sounds good to you. If this is your first time joining me, my name is Stephanie Poole. I am a certified doula and lactation consultant, and I've helped hundreds of women prepare for birth and successfully learn how to breastfeed. And so, yeah, that's my mission. That's why I'm here, and I'm excited to talk about birth plans today because I sometimes I find myself really getting on a soapbox about this because that's how strongly I feel about it. But then again, I kind of feel that way about all of my core pillars that I teach on. So whether it is breastfeeding or birth plans or childbirth, I kind of feel strongly about all of it because it's such a life passion of mine. But without any further ado, let me jump right in by hitting you with a very, very important statistic. So, first off, did you know that research shows over 80 women who prepare for their birth, right, by making a birth plan, are over 80% more likely to have a positive birth experience? Yep. Yep. Let me just say that again. Research shows women who prepare for their birth by making a birth plan are over 80% more likely to have a positive birth experience. Y'all, that's how important it is to make a birth plan. If you are pregnant and you are going to be giving birth, then you need a birth plan. And I think that the misconception is that birth plans are outdated or birth plans don't work. But I am going to talk today about how to make a effective birth plan that you can actually use during birth. Hey guys, as you are joining, please put where you're joining me from. I always like to know who I'm speaking to. Maybe let me know what trimester you're in if you're pregnant, because I like to know that as well. Um, all right, so first things first, why is it important to make the plan? It's important to make the plan because guess what? You're making a birth plan in your mind, even if you don't write one down. Right? If you are headed to the grocery store, let's just use this as an example. If you're headed to the grocery store, you likely have an idea in your head, the ingredients that you need to pick up, even if you don't write a list, right? But what happens, the power in writing that grocery list before you get to the store is you actually walk out with the things that you need without forgetting items, right? Without feeling like, oh, I got to go back, I got to spend more money. No, you're prepared with that plan. So I like to bring that up as food for thought. Also, I want you to consider this. And I've said this before in, I think one of my other videos, is a common analogy that I use often, which is if you're pregnant and you're giving birth, that's not something we just kind of leave up to chance. No, we need to make a plan. Why? Because if you were getting married, you would be planning the wedding, right? Very few people wake up and say, hey, I'm going to get married today. Most people take the time to find a venue, to try on dresses, to, call around for caterers and DJs. Y'all, if we put that much work, that much thought into planning a wedding, you should definitely be putting some thought, some plan together for your birth experience, okay? So I want you to keep that in mind as we move forward in this conversation, because it is truly important, and there are ways for you to make an effective birth plan that will actually support you during your birth. So let me start by just hopping right into the very first secret. These are secrets, guys. And so I have to say that to make it juicy, right? But the very first secret to making or building an effective birth plan is to not overcomplicate it. Now, I have my trusty tablet here because I want to make sure I don't forget any of these important things. But the very first thing is just simply not to overcomplicate your birth plan. You want to focus on areas of importance for you. There should always be an overarching 4 to 7 areas that you have preferences for. Because the thing of why birth plans, people get frustrated with them and they say they don't work, is because you're trying to control every single aspect of the birth. And more than likely, that's just not possible. But if you have an overarching structure and you hit the key points of what's important, that is going to be more effective. It will allow you to hit the areas that are important to you, and the things that aren't, you're a little bit more flexible on those, right? Also, I want to say this isn't really in my notes, but it is important to consider why you need to be diligent in making a plan. Because on that day, right, when you are in labor, labor is intense, y'all. If this is your first time, help me out in the comments. If this is your first time giving birth, put the number 1. If you are expanding your family, meaning that you've already given birth, and so you're going to be expanding your family with another baby, put 2. So 1, if this is your first pregnancy and first birth. 2, if you are expanding your family in this particular pregnancy. And the reason why I say that is because, if you've experienced pregnancy before, you know how intense labor is. When you're in the thick of it, you don't want to have to make every little decision on the spot. That is going to result in what we call decision fatigue, which basically means that you are tired of making the decision. So then you fall into this space of, yeah, okay, that's fine. I don't really, okay, that's okay. Yeah, I don't care. Let's just go with it. You get into that mode, right? That is called decision fatigue. You can maybe be that way when you're picking out your dinner choices, right? Like, okay, yeah, it doesn't matter. I'll just eat this instead of that. But when you come down to your birth experience, you have to be intentional, right? And having those 4 to 7 key areas of preference is going to help you tremendously to not feel overwhelmed and to be struck with that decision fatigue, which causes you to just kind of allow birth. This is a saying that I have. Don't allow birth to happen to you. Allow it to happen through you. Okay? So picking the first secret is don't overcomplicate it. Find those 4 to 7 areas of preference, and you are going to plan in those areas. That is what means the most to you. So that's secret number 1. Secret number 2 is to use positive language. Use positive language. So what do I mean by that? I don't want you to frame things as I don't want, right? I don't want an epidural. I don't want this. I don't want that. Instead, I want you to frame it as I prefer to not have an epidural. I prefer to labor, for as long as I can without having this particular intervention. You're going to frame it in a more positive way. Not I don't want. Instead, you're going to embrace, I prefer to be able to bounce on, a pregnancy bouncing ball. I prefer to walk during my labor I versus sitting or laying back in a bed. You're going to frame it in a more positive way. What does this do? This helps you to stay open, right? When you and not just for you and in your mindset, but also it's a better way to communicate with your birth team. So when you frame things in a more positive aspect, that makes people more available to you in terms of helping you push your vision further along. If that makes sense, just drop yes in the comments. Essentially, you're not going to position or frame your wording as I don't want, I don't want, I don't want, because that kind of shuts people down. It shuts people down to hear you say what you don't want, right? But if you position it in a frame when you say, I prefer to have, that makes it open for me to be able to say, okay, she prefers this over that. Okay, so here we go. When you say secret number three is to include flexibility. Now, what do I mean by that? Birth, very rarely, I've attended, I can't even count how many births. And in attending those births, very few of them actually go spot by spot by spot how we envisioned from the beginning. There's usually some kind of nuance that takes place that will move things or shift things in one way or another. There's usually something that happens in that way. So it's important to stay flexible. Now, I'm going to share a particular instance that comes to mind right off the bat. I had a client and we were planning for a regular vaginal birth. Okay. She had been moving throughout pregnancy. There was no particular health issues going on. Just everything was ideal, right? And so we're making this plan, we're moving forward. And a week before her due date, she goes in to her doctor. They're checking her vitals, and her vitals are not looking good. They're concerning to the doctor, right? And so in that moment, the doctor decides, I'm not really okay with like how your blood pressure and some of your labs are coming back. I'm going to send you over to the hospital. Let's just be cautious and, make sure everything is okay and that the baby is okay. So that's we headed to the hospital. Now I'm cutting across the field here, but that was something right at that moment that we hadn't really planned for, right? But it happened. We stayed open, we stayed flexible. Throughout the full birth, there were maybe one or two other things that happened because that mom ended up going into labor and we ended up delivering the baby. There were some things to take place, but overall, she was so glad she made a plan because we had already discussed what her preferences were. We had already discussed what was important to her. That had been well communicated. And so even though she went earlier, unexpected, and with a few things happening health-wise, she was still literally, because I do exit surveys for all of my clients, and we always talk about, how do you feel about your experience? And even though things didn't go exactly according to how she had planned, she still felt like she had a positive birth experience because so many of the other points had been hit. She was able to infuse her preferences into so many other areas of her birth. She still felt seen, she still felt heard, she still felt supported. That is why having a birth plan is so important. It's important because it will help you to have some sense of influence over your birth, even when you can't control every aspect. And I would be irresponsible as a doula and as someone in the childbirth space if I didn't help to prepare you that you need to be prepared, because it's likely that things may not go exactly the way you want it to go. I mean, that it would just be irresponsible for me not to prepare you for that. Right? We are hoping for the best, we're preparing for the best. We want everything to follow a certain flow, but if it doesn't, we're going to be prepared enough in enough areas where we're going to be able to pick up the slack, what regardless of how things unfold. And that is so key. You have to have that mindset in order to have a successful, positive birth experience. And let me just, while I'm on this road, let me be very specific and say, when we say, I want you to have a positive birth experience, that doesn't mean that I'm expecting everything to go perfect. It just means that I expect that we will be prepared enough that we'll be able to handle whatever unfolds during your birth journey. Okay? That's the importance of, understanding what it means to have a positive birth experience. Okay, moving along. The very last secret that I want to share is just to be very open and honest with your team, right? You have to be clear about what it is that is important to you, right? And you have to communicate that to your birth team. Why? Because your birth team is going to help to advocate for you. Your doula, your provider, your partner, they're all going to be available. Once you communicate what your birth plan is to them, then they will be able to help clearly advocate for you when it comes to what your birth preferences are. And so all of this needs to be done before the baby is born. There, you need to sit down. You need to clearly express what those 4 to 7 areas are that are of importance to you, so that you communicate it clearly to them and they can help to communicate on, during your birth. Why is that important? Because again, that goes back to what I mentioned before, that birth is very intense. It's very intense. If you are able to get your point across while you're laboring, while you're, handling and breathing contraction, more power to you. More power to you. But the reality is, most people are not able to do that. To get through a contraction, usually, especially the more intense they are, the more further you are in labor, requires your full attention. You have to focus. You have to focus that energy, that breathing, to really be able to deal with the discomfort of the contractions. And so what does that mean? That means you need a partner, you need a doula, you need a provider who's going to be able to advocate for your preferences when you're not able to advocate for them. Okay? So, with that being said, let me just do a brief recap of the 4 secrets. The first one is to keep it simple. Don't try to control every part of your birth experience. Just pick, I recommend, between 4 to 7 areas of preference. That's number 1. Number 2, use positive language. Try not to, structure things as I don't want this or I don't want that. Instead, to position it as I prefer to have this, or I prefer to labor in this particular way. That will allow you to stay open, and it helps to communicate in a positive way to your birth team who's going to advocate for you. The third thing is to include flexibility, right? You got to be open to, if things don't, this is my preferred plan. I've already made it and I'm very clear about what it is I prefer. But if that doesn't happen, I'm open and I'm flexible, and I've considered these other options as well. You got to stay flexible. The last thing is to share your plan with your birth team. Once you know what you want and you've considered all your options and you've laid it out in a very clear way, you need to communicate that clearly with your birth team. When you communicate clearly with your birth team, then they will be able to advocate for you in the event that you are, focused on your contraction and you can't advocate for yourself. You have a team that can voice what your preferences are because you've already talked about it. You've already made your wishes known. Y'all, building a birth plan in this way will help you to be effective. You don't need like a 10-page PDF, but you do need to be clear in the areas that are important to you, what your preferences are, right? And remember, like I said, I've attended tons of births. Very few of them actually happen from A to Z in an exact pattern that you have wished for. Very few of them do. So going in, understanding that helps you to know I'm flexible. These are my preferences, but I'm flexible, and I want to make sure that no matter what, I feel seen, I feel heard, and I feel supported. Okay? Those are that's what I have for you today. If this is something that you're interested in, I do have a link that will be linked below this video. You could check it out. I actually have a birth blueprint that is already laid out. It's a template that I have pulled that I use. It's the exact strategy I use to help my clients get their birth blueprint together. And it's very comprehensive. It helps to actually support you, not just on the day of delivery, but even afterwards in that immediate postpartum. We've made a plan for that, right? And so if you are interested in what my exact strategy is, I will have it linked below. Y'all, it's good. It's good because it's tried and true. You can also work with me one-on-one in an intensive where I help you customize your plan exactly for you. So that is there as well. I always enjoy going live. I always enjoy connecting with you guys. It's truly a joy and an honor. All right, until next time, happy birthday, y'all. Bye.